Okay, welcome everyone. Hello and good evening to all. Welcome to tonight's Adopt Life Facebook Live event, Transcending the Lived Experience Through the Power of Voice with Ingrid Palmer. It is our hope that tonight you will join us in learning and discussion as Ingrid Palmer shares her story of surmounting racism, ableism, and early childhood trauma as a Crown Ward in Toronto Children's Aid Society, and how she transitioned from a timid, awkward child with no hope of a bright future to a powerful, inspirational speaker committed to advancing equity for everyone. We welcome you to join in with comments and questions, and let's see where the conversation takes us. For those of you that are new to our page, as I mentioned, we're live streaming and it is on our public Facebook page. So when you are putting in your comments and questions, I just ask that you are mindful of what, if any, identifiable information you're putting in there, just because it is on our public page, so it's accessible to anyone. So I just wanted to put that little nugget of information out there for those of you that are new to us. I had the pleasure of listening to Ingrid speak last week. I think it was already last week at the Youth and Care Day event that the OCAC put on. So I'm really excited about tonight. I'm just going to introduce Ingrid officially. For those that are not maybe familiar, Ingrid Palmer is an award-winning inspirational speaker, a diversity and inclusion consultant, and the founder and CEO of Focus on Ability. As a partially sighted woman of color, Ingrid works with organizations to build stronger and supportive communities. A former Crown Ward herself, Ingrid has championed voices in the child welfare, disability, education, housing, and poverty sectors. And in addition, she serves as board chair for the Child Welfare Political Action Committee, a community mentor with Cheers, a mentorship program for Black youth care, and a storyteller of disabled narratives at D Next. So I hope you will join me in welcoming Ingrid. So happy that you could be here with all of us tonight. And I think I'm just going to pass it over because people are here to listen to you and not to me.
Thank you so much, Chantal. And I would just like to begin with a land acknowledgement and equity statement. So we are so thankful to the original keepers of this land, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples, and the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for hosting us this evening. You know, colonialism is not a thing of the past, it is ongoing. And so decolonization is a continuous process as well. So this evening, we honor the Indigenous voices that have long called for justice. This evening, we honor the Black voices that have long called for justice. We honor the voices from the disability, the LGBTQ+, and the children and youth in care communities whose voices have long cried for justice. Tonight, I acknowledge the strength, the intelligence, fortitude, capacity, worthiness of all oppressed voices. Tonight, I further acknowledge all that you have been through, all that you are dealing with right now, and all that you will go through, because you know what? Life is life. I validate your justified rage. I validate your passionate resolve, your unquenchable hope, your determined spirits. I recognize your presence. I recognize your possibility and your futures. Our voices collectively, those from the past and those of today, have the power to force the broader society to consider how their human rights intersect with ours, how their norms too often dictate and negatively impact ours, and how our challenges are continuously escalated instead of being sufficiently mitigated. And when being in care is still viewed as some sort of moral consequence that sentences youth and children in care to having less, being expected to be capable of less, of receiving less, then we must continue to learn to use and embody our voices in order to honor those that came before us and to continue the fight for justice. And so in that spirit of vocal power and capacity, I welcome you into this space just as you are, to be who you are, to be how you are, and to share your voice this evening in this discussion. And so, you know, our related realities have brought us together. As was said in the intro, I am a former Crown Ward and a former Youth from Care, and you will hear me refer to youth in care as us and we, because no matter how old I get, I am still a part of that community. It's my favorite community. There is absolutely no shame in my past and in being a former foster kid or in care. So I do often slip into us and we when I'm talking about youth in care, because that's how much I still feel very much connected to the community. So I just wanted to say that in case I do it and you're wondering why this nearly 50-year-old woman is referring to herself as a youth. Diversity, you know, is a statistic, but inclusion is how you feel that you belong. And that's the difference, because people sometimes tend to mix that up. So voice provides an outlet to pain. Voice creates pathways to healing. Voice builds resources. Voice enables opportunities. Voice navigates constraints. Voice pushes back. Voice forges forward. Voice leads to reaching out for what you need. Voice facilitates having constraints lifted. Voice creates power, and voice mitigates needs. Voice gives the power to correct injustice, and voice harnesses the power to impact. And for many children and youth in care, that is so important, because we have so often felt the impact of many other voices upon our lives. And many of us have not enough experienced the way that our voices can also impact our own lives and what we can accomplish with it. So that's why I am such a really strong believer and proponent for building and nurturing voices, especially for children and youth in care, because I really do believe that it is although it's getting better, still an underutilized mechanism for empowerment and for creating more positive outcomes, especially when we leave care, or just for being an adult and making your own decisions. So what is your addition to what you think the power of voice can do? I'd love if you would share your own voice statement in the chat, and I'll check back in a little while and see if you have any statements of what you think that voice could do, or the power that it has. So many youth and children who come into contact with child protective systems become conditioned to suppressing their dreams, to suspending their beliefs in what can be for them. Many youth and children in care are taught through messages that we receive through society and through our treatment that their hopes are futile, that their desires are unattainable, and that their futures are set. And, I call like complete nonsense on that. And like I said, that's why I believe that the nurturing and building of strong voices of youth in care, that is the counteraction for all those false messages that we receive while we're in care. So I just want to take a moment and check and see, Chantal, if anyone took the time to add their own voice statement to the chat.
I do have a question. Somebody asked that, her child is a preteen, he's Indigenous, and also lives with complex disabilities. So as a parent, how can I help support him in developing his voice to self-advocate?
Well, I would say, and something that I want to add is that when I speak about voice, I'm not only speaking about vocal power, although I will most likely refer to it that way. Having voice can come across in many ways. So it can be through art, it can be through dance, it can be through written, it can be through many other expressions. And so it's important to pay attention to your child and their modes of expression and what they like, and encourage that. And be creative. Don't feel that expression has to be in the traditional way, but as parents, we are our children's first voice. We model for our children how to voice, how to advocate by advocating for them. So the first step is actually doing it for them and doing it in front of them and modeling that you speak up for your needs, that you push back against things that don't make you feel good or that are not serving you. So I would start out by modeling voice. I would pay attention to how your child expresses themselves. And I would also recommend, I have a son who's on the spectrum also. And so one thing that I have done is continued patience and repetitive. And I know that we all do that. And sometimes we feel like, oh, it's not working. Keep going, keep repeating. It is sinking in, it is getting there. And sometimes it shows up when we least expect it. So that would be my first encouragement.
That's awesome. I was thinking too, like the power of developing your voice is also the power of developing your identity, right? Someone else said, I believe voice can change policy and change systems.
Absolutely. Voice has a huge power to impact, and we need to increase that. And I believe, like in my work, and I work a lot with nonprofit organizations, and a lot of time, I'll hear that, like they feel like what they're doing is futile. And I always point to the child welfare community. I always point to the dynamic people that we have from child welfare that are doing amazing things, that are starting their own companies that support. We have Project Outsider. We have people like Cheyenne Ratnam. We have other people from CARE like Jane Kaborakora, who has now become the first former youth from CARE who is leading the very Children's Aid Society that raised her. Children and youth in care are doing phenomenal stuff. When you look at things like Hair Story and Feathers of Hope and what they accomplished, and how they are still together as an organization, and they have maintained what they're doing even after the closure of the Child and Youth Advocates Office, that we have incredible examples of young people in care and from care that are doing phenomenal work and pushing systemic and social change. And we need more and more voices to join in that. And one thing I want to encourage people, because different strokes for different folks, some people don't want to be advocating on a political level or on big levels. And you know what? You don't have to. Advocating just for yourself in your own life, in the circles that you occupy, in the spaces that you go to, that's enough. That is actually working together to make a huge difference, because if everybody would do that just in their general lives, think of that collective movement and the power that that has. So I want to encourage everyone that every little bit counts, that even a soft voice is a powerful thing. So don't ever think that that speaking softly isn't having impact. It does. Should I go on, Chantal, or is
yeah, I think we're good. That's it.
Okay.
I'll pop back in if there's more questions.
Great. So, and I just want to encourage everybody, to definitely make use of the chat, and I will remember to keep checking in to see what your comments or questions are. So there was a time in my life when I didn't feel like I had a voice. I didn't know that anyone would ever listen to me, to what I had to say, or that they would care. I certainly didn't feel understood a lot of the time when I did speak up, and I certainly didn't feel heard most of the time either. You see, as a child, I could never have imagined that one day I would be speaking up on large platforms in front of people who have the power to make changes, because for so long in my life, my own voice was stilled. It was not listened to, and speaking up didn't do me any good. I went into foster care in grade 7 after being molested. And in my teens, I was diagnosed while I was in care with 2 disorders. One that a rare disorder, retinitis pigmentosa, that has caused me to be slowly and continuously going blind my whole life. And at 16, while I still was in care, I was also diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome, which as a side effect caused me to grow a beard as a female. And polycystic ovaries is something that affects about 10% of women. And so I was the lucky one to win having 2 rare disorders, at once. And so having those type of interlocking intersectionalities of being, a visually impaired Black female in foster care with a gender non-conforming characteristics, you better believe that I felt like my life was just the perfect storm for adversity, exclusion, and inequity. And indeed, it was. The multi-layers that I had to navigate as a youngster with discrimination and social stigma was really heavy, and it was really difficult. As a child, I couldn't explain my disorder. When I got diagnosed, I learned that I had tunnel vision. So I couldn't see as much as most people did. And so I was very clumsy, always stumbling into things. I lacked depth perception. So my world is very flat. Things would look embedded into each other. And faces are very difficult for me to read. So it was really hard for me to recognize people. If you changed your hair or put on a hat, you were a completely different person for me. But I did navigate. I did walk around. And so for people, they would see me and say, I was always accused of pretending, of exaggerating, of just wanting attention, when I knew that I really wasn't doing that. My vision could change drastically by just turning my head or taking a couple steps, because my pupils didn't constrict or enlarge in different lights like most people did. So you can imagine having this weird visual impairment and having to navigate that and having to navigate also not being believed. So not only are you struggling in so many different ways, but you're not believed in your struggle, because in one sense you're seen as too capable, and when you're not capable, you're just seen as a stooge. As you know, so some of the things I did seem so silly that people just thought I was pretending. For instance, if someone opened the door for me to go through, more often than not, I'd still walk into the door. And that had a lot to do with my lack of depth perception, of being able to tell where the opening was. But for many people, they just saw that, oh, she's just goofing off. She just wants to pretend. So living in an ableist society, also being looked upon in the other end of not being capable of anything. So not being included because I would mess up in certain ways. So I definitely wasn't good at ball games, you know, badminton or tennis or volleyball or basketball or anything like that. So I definitely wasn't chosen for a lot of things. And I did struggle. So exclusion was, you know, a norm for me, unfortunately. And then I did do really, really well in school, but at the beginning of each year, I'd be accused of cheating, because who would expect me to do well in school? And plus being Black, I also had to deal with the discrimination and the racism of just automatically not being expected to be able to achieve because of the color of my skin. And so every year it was a matter of the beginning few months of school of proving that I'm capable to my teachers, and then the tune would change, but it would start all over again the next year. And then with having a beard as a female and being socially perceived as a trans woman, I got spit on. I got called all kind of names, you know, faggot, she-male, he, she, it was a big one. People would not want to sit down beside me. Traveling on the bus, my seat would always stay empty, even if the bus was packed, like 9 out of 10 times. People would refuse me service. As a visually impaired person, I sometimes struggled. I could navigate. I traveled on TTC all the time, but sometimes I would have trouble finding where I was going because I couldn't read the numbers or the names. And asking people for help, I'd immediately get, don't talk to me. Don't talk to me. And so that was hard. And that was because of who they thought I was. And life just felt very hard. There was definitely times in my life where I really felt the weight of everything I was dealing with, having PTSD from being molested, feeling abandoned being in care because I wasn't fought for. Becoming a Crown Ward was very easy. No one was fighting that at all. Feeling discriminated against because of my race, at times of being Black, and then having a disability on top of it. Like everything was just so weighted and so much that I really developed this inner rage, to the point where strangers used to approach me and say things like, it's not so bad, life's gonna be okay. And I would find it so irritating. I just couldn't understand why total strangers were coming and saying this to me, but it's because I had no idea that my inner turmoil was showing so much on my face and how I carried myself that it was just seen. And I raged so much against the world, and adults were just a set of people that I completely detested. Always felt let down, abused, oppressed, and felt that even when I came into care, that didn't change. And so my reaction was just to rage against the world and against everybody. And that was how I felt I could use my voice. I was tired of being impacted upon all the time by other people's voices. And so I would scream and rage and push back hard against even the tiniest things. What that would often get me was a whole lot of trouble, a whole lot of punishment, a whole lot of consequences. But for me, I was fighting for my life. When the staff in the group home that I eventually lived in, I lived in 3 foster homes. And after being kicked out of the last one just for being Black, I didn't do anything. They even said I didn't. They just weren't comfortable with having me in their home. I refused to go into any more foster homes and ended up at Airbot House in Parkdale in Toronto. And I lived there for 3.5 years. I basically grew up there. Average stay 6 months, but I stayed for 3.5 years. And in my rage against the staff and everything that they tried to do for me, they would have staff meetings just trying to figure me out. But I would rail against everything because they never included me in the process. And I would say to them, why don't you ask me how to deal with me? And they would just be, oh, you're so lippy, you're so rude. And they'd go away behind closed doors and consult. And of course, I would totally destroy any plans that they had for me. I wouldn't listen to anything. And what happened? It was like just serendipitous that a new staff was hired. And the staff that was on duty at the time that morning asked me to listen out for her because she was running late and had to run in the shower. And so I did. When the doorbell rang, I opened it, invited the staff in. And for some reason, it just clicked to me that I had a golden opportunity here because all new staff, volunteers, students, anybody who came in was immediately taught how to deal with me, that they had to join with everybody else and toe this really hard line and be really hard on me. And everybody did that. But here came this new staff, and I felt like I had an opportunity to talk with her before she could be tainted by the other staff. And so I said to her, you know what? You're going to hear a whole bunch of stuff about me, and they're all bad. And most of them are like pretty much true. But you and I could have a completely different relationship if you just listen to the things that I tell you. And so I explained to her how to deal with me. When I'm going off in a rage or I'm really upset about something, that is the wrong time to try to harness me. All I actually need is some space to walk away for a bit and calm down. And then if you come and talk to me, I'll be able to listen to you. But if you try to talk to me when I'm in a rage, I won't listen to you. And other steps like that I gave her. And these are things that none of the other staff would listen to me. And I had no idea, what was going to become of this. She sat and listened to me with wide eyes and, really didn't say anything. But for her credit, I could tell you, she incorporated everything that I told her. I have no idea what the staff said to her behind my back, but for whatever reason, she chose to listen to me and to validate what I had told her. And she became somebody that was able to manage me when I was at my worst, which is something that no one else could do. And we built trust because of that, because she incorporated my voice and my direction into her care plan for me. I was able to trust her. And because I was able to trust her, I allowed her to pour into me. Allowed her. And that is the big deal, is that a lot of caregivers sometimes don't realize that kids don't have to let you help them. They have control over that. And so the relationship building is the biggest piece, and the validation of voice. Yes, we all know that kids can't get everything they want, but we have to learn to listen to them, to have that two-way dialogue, and to incorporate the needs that they say that they need into their care plans as much as possible, or that's reasonable. I know that it can't be blanket and I can't give any rule for it. It's something that has to be done with the people who know the child and know other things. But it's really important that a child have a say in their care plan, and it's not a want, it's an absolute need, especially for youth who have experienced, and children that have experienced early childhood trauma. It's an absolute necessity to their recovery, to their healing, and to their overall empowerment and ability to navigate the world successfully on their own. So because of what Lynn did for me, as I said, she was able then to pour into me, and she began to teach me how to use my voice in ways that served me, in ways that I actually accomplished what I wanted to, and didn't only result in me getting punished. Because some of the times, the things that I was railing against were valid, but the way I was doing it wasn't getting me any of the things that I wanted. And so I began to learn how to use my voice in ways that serve me. And when I saw the power of that, when I saw that I could actually accomplish getting what I wanted, that I could make positive impacts in my life and determine certain things in my life, not everything, but when you experience success, it creates the need and the desire for more, and it reinforces that behavior. And so I learned how to speak to the staff, how to speak to the principals and teachers in school in ways where I was standing up for myself, defending myself, advocating for myself, but I no longer was getting suspended or thrown out of class. And more often than not, I was getting the result that I wanted. I wasn't able to be manipulated and taken advantage of and set up to fail in ways that I was being before, because I wasn't being triggered. I wasn't reacting. I learned how to respond. And I'm just going to pause here just to check to see if there's anything I should be addressing specifically.
I'm just going to go back a bit because there's just a few comments that if you want to catch up on. I'm going to go back to when you were talking about your disability. A comment was that saying that their daughter is legally deaf and blind and is also nonverbal, but she has taught me that not being able to speak isn't the same as having nothing to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. And she's so lucky and fortunate to have you, that you recognize that. And I can only imagine how lucky and fortunate you feel to have her in your life and how much you are learning from her. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I think so too. And a couple of comments just when you were telling your story about how you initially found your voice and how you got that to work for you. So someone responded saying, I love that I guess the new staff that you were talking about, chose to listen to you and to hear what you told her. You knew you needed yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then another reply to saying, I think as parents, we tend to focus on teaching our kids ways to manage certain behaviors or behavior. But sometimes you need to take a step back and let them be our teachers as well.
Absolutely. And I know that it's not always an easy thing, because we have a focus. Sometimes we have, we have goals or dreams or wants for our kids. And sometimes we try to fit into that. And sometimes coming back to the behaviors, sometimes the behaviors are linked to a lack of voice. It's another mode of expression. Behavior is also voice. And if I can't say it or get it in this way, then it's going to manifest in another way. So teaching our children how to articulate what their feelings are, what their desires are, and what their dreams are in all different ways is only beneficial and really transfers into other ways that are beneficial for their lives also. And it really is a learning lesson for us to really listen with our hearts. And I have to say with our hearts and not our ears, because even when we hear with our ears, sometimes we still don't get it. But when we really open our hearts up and listen to what they're saying and what they're trying to communicate with their hearts, that's when we get the real message. And that comes through. And the point too is, even if you don't get it at first, don't stop going back and asking again. And sometimes I do that with my kids. Sometimes they get frustrated when I'm not understanding what they're saying. And I say, you know what? Try and tell me another way. Because we do that as parents sometimes too. We say something and we keep saying it the exact same way and getting frustrated that what we're saying is not getting heard. But sometimes we need to go about it a different way. We need to choose different words. We need to choose a different method perhaps. And one thing that I've also learned is that we need to give space. I've learned that especially with my son who's on the spectrum. Once I used to think, I gotta know what you're upset about right now. I gotta know what happened right now. But I found that doing that only made him less able to speak. And I learned that when I was patient and when I would just comfort in silence and not And it was hard because sometimes it's, we just want to know because we want to help fix it right now. But waiting a day or 2 or 3, all of a sudden he could articulate it because he was able to take the time to process the feelings. But in the moment, he couldn't do it. And that was a big lesson that I had to learn, that I didn't have to know right that second. Sometimes we do, but other times, you know what, we don't. We could just comfort in the moment and give them time. When they're further removed from the situation, they're so much better able to articulate what happened, what they were feeling. And sometimes too, even we're in a better space too, to actually navigate that and give suggestions of, you know what, these are some other things that you could try next time. This is something that you could think about next time that happens, next time you're feeling that big emotion or you're frustrated or that. So that's one good lesson I've learned, is that things don't have to be immediate.
I absolutely would do the same thing. Like, something's wrong, I need to fix this right away. And just want to jump in, right? Because
yes,
of course you don't like to see your child in pain or upset. And my youngest would actually have finally, I think he was, I don't know at the time, I can't remember, but he actually said, Mom, I just need to be by myself right now. Like I was like, I really have to listen to you and just give you your space. But
and isn't that hard to hear?
Yeah, what do you mean you don't need me?
No way. You know, that's hard. That can be really hard for us to hear, but really good for us to listen to our children and actually give them what they need. And it's so empowering, because when they see that asking for what I need and receiving what I need helps me, then I think it strengthens their ability to advocate with others, right? Because if we can't listen to them and give them what they need, how on earth are we going to compel them and teach them to do that at school or to do that outside, right? So it starts with us.
Yeah, definitely hitting definitely a line here. A lot of comments saying yes, always like wanting to rush in and fix things, and giving that time can be so hard as a parent.
Yeah, not easy. I'm with you there. I'm with you there. And even when you know it, doesn't necessarily make it easy to do, but practicing and really stretching ourselves to do just that. And when you see the rewards of it, like it's really great when you see that independence or that knowledge, or you see their ability grow to express themselves in whatever way it is, if it's through art, if it's through, because sometimes with my son too, I say, send me an email because he can't talk about it, right? And I really come to understand that it's not a not wanting to, it's a difficulty. It really is. So I'll say, send me an email, you know, when you can, and he does, you know. So that's
finding ways that they can express themselves in an like that's more fluid and easy for them. That's whether it's by writing or whatever, drawing a picture,
cooking. I'm telling you, we've got to be more open to expressions and to the ways of communication, and to really see that it really can take different forms. And that's why I'm saying that we've got to study our children. You know, and you know, one thing that I've learned too is to really question what we think and to ask them. Because I've done this many times where, you know, I think, oh, I know my daughter, I know my son, they wouldn't like that, or I've never heard them talk about that, or I'll get them a gift and I'll be like, oh, this is what they want. And what happens? They're like, they would have picked the other one. You're like, what? You know, you never would have guessed that they would have liked that one. They never mentioned it to you. They never told you. You know, but guess what? They don't necessarily share everything with us. And so I've learned to question what I think and to ask, is this true? We don't do that enough. Is this true? Like, I think this, you know, is that true about you? And they'll tell you. And so,
that's interesting. I like that. I'm going to start using that.
I'm telling you, you're going to be rocked. I'm just preparing you. Be prepared to be completely shocked. Because you're going to hear some things and be like, what? Really? Guarantee you.
Yeah, someone just said, yeah, my son sends me text messages. He can express himself so much more than face to face.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And learning like and different ways too, because it's so hard because everyone's different. And my daughter will tell me, it's just like, you don't listen. It's like, well, what do you mean I don't listen? She'd be like, yes, you don't listen. And so, and of course, like my spirit didn't feel that, but I had to listen to what she's saying and then become really reflective. And she wasn't always able to tell me, the ways that I didn't listen or why she couldn't talk to me. And, she'd be like, you know, you sound angry. And I'm like, well, I have a powerful voice. I can't help it. Like I speak really powerfully. But it really taught me, and I taught her to like, we've got to meet halfway. You've got to try to understand that mom has this forceful voice, and I at the same time have to learn to be aware of it and rein it in. But I've learned that nothing can be all one way, and that we've got to teach our kids that too, to meet us halfway, because we've got to each accept each other how they are, but we've also got to accept the ways in which we are that impose or that hurt the people that we are relating to. So it's a two-way street, because we can't totally change ourselves, but we should try to mitigate things. And on the other side, there's got to be some understanding on that end too. So I try and encourage this meeting in the middle. So you try to understand me, and I'll try to understand you too, and we'll both do a little bit. Because sometimes, we can't totally change who we are, but things about us are irritating to our children and ways that they are to us. So it's this kind of meeting in the middle. And when we can teach our children that we don't have power over them, that we are both teachers. Like, I'll tell my kids that we are all teachers in this family. That's what me and my husband say, that we're all teachers and learners. It's not just mom and dad teaching you, you're teaching us too. So things have to be negotiated both ways, and I think that's just an excellent skill for our children to use it. And I just believe that kids that are overcoming some kind of trauma or dealing with some difficulty in their life, that they need those building blocks even more. They need them even more. And so we have to make extra effort really to nurture that power, because that's what helps them navigate systems. That's what helps them navigate all these social constraints. Is your voice. It's an extremely powerful tool, and you don't have to be loud, but you have to be able to say no, and to say, I don't like that, or I want and I need. Those are important things that our children have to be able to articulate in some way.
So if a parent had a child who was very reticent and maybe and had difficulty expressing feelings, like really like vocalizing them, what suggestions would you have for that parent? Like, I know we touched other, like,
I would say you can make even keywords. One thing that my husband and I did with my eldest daughter is we gave her a word, and if she used it, just stands for something. So I need help, or I need this. Like, if she just used that word in a sentence or said it, and it was something then that nobody else would know. It could be keychain or monkey, but we knew that word stands for something else. So for children who have trouble speaking, maybe long sentences or something, maybe you can come up with keywords that stand for something. Can they say just that one word? If they say star, can that mean something? That, okay, instead of having to say this whole sentence that might be too difficult, or can you have what I think something that they can do? What about if if they squeeze your arm, that has a meaning to it. If they rub something and you come up together, what does that mean? What does that mean for us? And these are our things. These are our communication things. So sometimes we have to, just try and be creative and create your own language, create your own modes of expression that work for both of you. And of course, it's got to be a joint thing, right? So either the child leading or you making suggestions, and then, there comes to an agreement between you, but be creative about different ways of expressing things that are shorter. So that whole, like, if my kids come and squeeze my arm, that had a very specific meaning, and I knew exactly what that meant. And that could be done in front of people because nobody else knows what that means, right? They could just think they're just coming and touching my arm, but I know that has a meaning. Or if you use this key word, whether just alone or in a sentence, I know that something's up. I know that something is needed then. So you can try things like that. Of just being creative, and depending on a child's mobility, it's hard to say in general because you have to, it's something that you will come up knowing your child and maybe knowing things that they like to do, or words or shows they watch or expressions that could be meaningful. Like when my son was young, he was just like, everything was about cars. So everything, every motivational thing had to be around cars. And with my daughter, when she was really young, it might have been princesses or something. So knowing your child, that's why I said, like, studying your children. It's not something that we usually do. We just take it for granted that we know, but really being intentional about observing them will give you not necessarily a completely different perspective, but might open up some things that you just didn't really notice before. And having those conversations, if you can, over and over again. You might not get the answers the first 2-3 times, but that doesn't mean that you don't keep going back to them. Something's going to fall in place. I would really, really encourage you to keep having conversations, even if they don't seem successful. Try in different ways. But I feel that things do tend to fall into place or come out. Maybe it takes the 20th time before you get the answer. The other 19 times were silence or something else. But keep being persistent, because knowing with my kids, they can't always tell you in those moments for whatever reasons. And there are things sometimes, messages that we give our kids that they can't trust us. That we didn't know that we gave until at some point in some situation, casually at the park one day, now you just say, hey, remember that time, blah, 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 what was that about? And now it just comes out because it's a casual moment. But those other 6 times you asked when you sat them down maybe and said, hey, we got to talk about this, it didn't come out that way. But but I always will encourage you to keep asking at different points, and in the right circumstance, frame of mind, mood, something, you'll get an answer or a different perspective on the exact same situation that you've been trying to figure out. And also to remember that kids are better at explaining things past than current, which sounds weird, but just think about with us too, further removed sometimes makes it easier. So even though something happened months ago, or you're trying to work something out and you've been trying for a long time, keep it up. Keep it up. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
It's useful. Okay. Is there anything?
So there was a comment, it was further back, I think, when we were talking about like giving our kids space and letting them find their voice in whatever expression that takes. And I can relate to this comment too, because she said it's interesting because in my parents' generation, they would see this as disrespectful, but it's a way that works for our family, like letting the kids. And it's true, I was also raised in this like, well, you can speak when it's your turn to speak, and I'll let you know when it's your turn to speak. So even for me to like, not that I didn't agree with that, but so, I'm very into getting my kids to speak up for themselves. But I think it's also interesting, like having that, the way that you were parented, and trying to explain that to your parents, like, well, this is the way we're doing it. So
There's always that tension, right? Because we take what we like, if there was stuff, and we don't what we don't like, and we might, it might be halfsies. We might have kind of like something, but we tweak it to a way that we like it, and that's fair, and that's how it actually should be, right? And then there still is this tension because like, and I totally get that. Like, of course, I want my kids to speak up and be expressive, and then, at times, I don't. I know, because maybe I'm in a rush, or maybe something that's like, oh, I don't want you to speak up right now. But
it always seems to be when I'm in a rush trying to go get somewhere.
Exactly. It's like, oh, not now. Like, democracy, not now. Yeah. So we always have those moments that we have to navigate. And my daughter's favorite word for me over this past year has been hypocrite. So yeah. So and I used to get upset when she called me a hypocrite. But when she pointed out the ways that she felt I was, it was like, okay, undeniable. So it's like it can be hard to allow your children to have a voice in ways that, of course, like would never have gone down with you when you're being raised, or that feel. I definitely have felt uncomfortable, even though I want them to have a voice and to speak, and that's my learning curve, and that's my discomfort that I've got to learn to sit in and to grow through. Because if I knock that down, even though it prickles me, and remember that we want to tutor our kids. So I want her to have etiquette and to have tact. And so and that's something that I still, want to influence and for lack of a better word, I'm going to say train her on now. But it's like this weird thing where you almost have to allow the inappropriateness in order to do that. Weird and not easy to navigate. There's definitely a tension there, but in my quiet and reflective times, I kind of tell myself that I want her and need her to be forceful in certain situations when it would protect herself. So I'm very careful about how I go about trying to curb what I might see or feel is inappropriate, but to know that the longer and more painful way I think of doing it, and not just immediately stamping it down, will and give her the best empowerment of her voice. Because it's hard for kids to understand the when to do this and when not to if they don't get to practice it. I don't give my husband and I don't give our kids like ultimatum or fast set rules in anything, because it really can work against you. If I tell my kids, you never do this and you always do this, guaranteed there's going to come a time when you absolutely would have wanted them to do the opposite. And so instead, we need to raise critical thinkers who can so what we do is advise that this is what we think is the best to do majority of the time, but we try not to give hard and fast rules because you never know when a situation, and it always does, will present itself when it's not appropriate. And so you want to raise children who are able to be critical thinkers, who can rationalize when it's good. Like mom and dad says most of the time I shouldn't do this, but today in this situation, it's what needs to be done because my safety is in jeopardy. We all, know the stories of kids who have been told you never do this and will stay in a burning house or stay in a dangerous situation because they've been told this is what you have to do. And so that's what we try and avoid, is giving hard and fast rules, and mistakes will be made, but you have to allow that in order to get the better result in the end. Is to allow the mistakes, allow the misuse. And when I say allow, I mean you correct it or discuss it when it happens. But that, in my opinion, is a good way, because coming from abuse and seeing how having rules that are hard set leads to a lot of times to children being hurt, being abused, and not speaking about it. Is another reason why I can't do that. So there is absolutely no forced hugs or kisses for my kids ever. Their bodies are their own, even with me. If they don't want me to touch them or hug them, then hands off. Even for me as mom, I'm not going to be like, no, I'm your mother. Mm-mm.
Yeah, for sure. It's good. Someone just mentioned that having a community that can help find different ways to connect and ways their children use their voice is helpful.
Absolutely. I've totally gone off script here. I'm not even doing my thing anymore. Let's just talk. But I absolutely so agree with the importance of being connected to your community, whatever that is. And with me, with my intersectionalities, I have a variety of communities. I have, a Black community, of course, I'm in community with women, my disability community, my child welfare community. I have all these different communities, and I love it because whenever I am with a particular community, there is so much freedom that's there in certain ways. If I'm with my disability community, or child welfare, whatever, there's just a level of understanding that comes there that isn't you don't have to do any type of preamble or explain it or frame it. You're just on par. Everybody's on par and you get it. You know what I mean? You're there and you can go deeper or go here without explaining. And there's just a comfort level in being that I experience in different communities. And I find that it's so important for children to be connected to their pertinent communities, because it also shows them that they're not alone in whatever it is. Whether it's being in care, whether it's being adopted, maybe whether it's a disability, whether it's I like skateboarding, so I'm with my skateboard people. It doesn't matter what it is. Children need to be connected to their pertinent communities so they feel that sense of belonging, they learn better, and they see accomplishment, they see creativity, they see so many different things and learn so many different things, and it normalizes their being. So it's so important for those connections to happen, even if they don't appreciate them at first or want to. You can always continue to encourage to try, to give a chance, things like that, because the benefits are priceless. And for parents and for us, we need community. We need connections to our pertinent communities also. We need those supports. We need those no need to explain, communities where we can just be supported and be validated and learn. There's always so much to learn from other people who have done and tried things maybe that you haven't, or have suggestions, and you have gifts to give and share with other people who need to hear them too. So absolutely, community is such an important aspect for everyone.
Yeah, I agree. That's my two. Someone just added this. It's a quote. We don't know where the source is, but I heard someone say once, quote, "Our job as parents is not to be our kids' voice, but to be their microphone when they need it."
I love that. That's right. Amplifying. You are amplifying their needs. You know, you're being that sounding board and modeling that. I love that quote. That is so great. And just remembering how, like, we are their first voice. Remember when they're babies, like, we speak for them. And when they're first learning to talk and your friends or family come over, they have no idea what they're saying. we have to interpret. Yeah. So it's
we did develop a language, right? Because interpreting body language and
all
sounds.
of that. Yes. And nobody, you know, your kids say certain things and nobody has a clue. They just think they're babbling, but you're like, oh no, they're saying this and that.
I remember my in-laws were like, what? And I'm like, oh, he said this. I'm like, hello.
Exactly. And then I love that quote that you then transition to the microphone. Love that. That's great.
Okay, I think we're all caught up on questions and comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I can continue in the sense that what Lynn started with me when she first nurtured my voice, and she only stayed a year and then she was gone, and I was still at Arabon House for I think another 2.5 years before I moved on. So there were others, fortunately, who stepped in, and I had teachers and different people who really empowered me and encouraged voice. And learning to speak truth to power, I think is one of the most important and vital skills that I learned that carried me through you know, post-care, because we all know that aging out is pretty traumatic. It's pretty young to be on your own and having to navigate these really complex systems. And, you know, I always say that it's really unfortunate that that vulnerable people don't attract, you know, most humanitarians. You attract predators. Those are the first people who want to come and take advantage or manipulate you. So having an empowered voice is absolutely so important, because people who continually get victimized, you know, a lot of times are people who are unable to speak up for themselves and unable to say no and unable to express their needs, or are constantly putting their needs aside for other people. And we really need to nurture that a little bit of selfishness is actually a good thing. That thinking of yourself and putting yourself first and letting your needs be known is a good thing to do, an important thing to do. And so many of our kids and youth are not accessing post-secondary education. The numbers are very dismal. And it's one thing that I'm very proud about the work of the Child Welfare PAC has done in obtaining restriction-free tuition waivers for youth in and from care with no age restrictions on it at all, and that are fully funded in universities. Like, we've got universities and colleges in Ontario and out east, and one in BC, and you know, and that's growing. And it's so important to encourage our children to strive and to believe that they can go on to post-secondary, and when they're ready. And that's the thing I love with the no age restrictions, is that you don't have to beat these milestones that everyone else is pushing for. And if you're not ready at 18 or 24 yet, and you still have things that you need to work through in order to pursue your post-secondary education, that's okay. That's okay, you know, and that when you are ready, the pathway is still there for you. And that's such an important thing, to remove that pressure and to be able to develop at your pace and at your speed, because healing and mental health is so important, and that you need to have a really good support system and a really good, you have to be in the right place really to pursue, and that there's nothing wrong. Your dreams don't have expiration dates, and it's okay to not be ready right away, and it's okay to need more time. And that's another thing that we really have to encourage and support. And I loved being able to share my stories because I find that they really connect people, and not everybody else can do it, and that's okay. But it is something that I can do and that I'm able to do. And I know that speaking is like the #1 fear, they said. I looked it up one time. They said people are more afraid of speaking than dying. I was like, what? Like death was like, I think #2 or #3 in public speaking. It was #1. And I was like, wow. But I like that because when I speak and I see that I'm clearing away misconceptions that people have and helping to reduce stigma and talking about all the great and amazing kids that I met during my time in care, and explaining to people that what they see and view as and want to label as delinquency or badness or rude behavior is a cry and a call for help, and it's a protection. It's a protection from what you've been through, and just to shed some light on people's experiences and what they've been through through sharing my own has been really great for me to see when people tell me that I've opened up new perspectives for them in thinking about certain groups, and really shed some light on beliefs that they have held. That to me it's so wonderful. I love it. And advocating for change in child welfare, in inclusion and belonging for everybody is just something that just brings me so much joy. And it's not what I went to school for. It's not what I thought I'd be doing. But when I did graduate from university, I couldn't get a job to save my life. And that's when I realized that, wow, being visually impaired is like at the bottom of the barrel too. They would have rather that I had a physical disability rather than eyesight. They just couldn't get past that. And it didn't matter that I had excellent grades. I was seen as a liability to have. What if I fell? They would always ask me, like, I'm going for a job interview about, something, and you're talking about what if I fall over the garbage can and hurt myself? I wasn't prepared for those questions, but I kept getting them all the time. I get called back for second and third interviews, but when it came down to it, they'd be like, I'd rather take somebody way less qualified or less qualified than you who has their vision. And so I started volunteering in the areas that meant a lot to me: child welfare, disability, education. And I started talking and advocating for different marginalized groups and voices, and doing this for free for many years before I realized that, hey, I could maybe make a living out of this. It's not what I dreamed of. I graduated speaking 4 languages. I wanted to be an ambassador for the United Nations, and I studied French, Italian, Spanish, and German. I loved languages all through high school and all through university. And don't ask me now, don't bother. They're all gone.
Let's switch it up in French.
No, I know, because you have to use it or you lose it. So
Definitely.
Done. But the power of voice for me has just been life-changing and transformative. And one thing I learned about myself is that I really need to be part of things that are bigger than myself and my own life, that I'm really, really passionate about actually making change. But I always encourage people that you don't have to be about that. Like I said, just in your own personal life is enough. And it's doing big things. I love advocacy and youth advocacy, and I can't say enough about getting more voices, but I also want people to know that that if the only places that you want to speak up are in your own life and in your own environments, that too is a big deal and a big part of the work of justice and bringing down stigma and bringing awareness and highlighting capacity of everybody, no matter what your disability is. You have a voice, you have capacity, you have gifts to bring, you have value, and no one has the right to say that you don't, or you need to sit in that corner over there and you don't belong. Everybody belongs. That's an aid and that's a right. And I will, forever be using my voice to advocate for the rights of everybody, no matter what identity or hat you wear, to have your place in society and to be able to contribute in your way and in your capacity, and that they're all valuable.
It's almost like you saw this question coming.
Oh.
How can we as parents help support the advocacy work you and other lived experts do? I mean, earlier this month, you spoke of Project Outsiders and Cheyenne, and they were both on. We have like a weekly snack and chat that we do, and we ask them those same questions, like what, if people want to get involved or people want to learn more about what it means to be an advocate for youth and care, what can they do?
Reach out.
Okay.
Invite out to, whatever. I don't know if you're a part of a group, like Zoom is so easy now, and have those voices that you appreciate or that you support, give them more platforms to speak. Let more people hear that, that message. In whichever way you can, like, in your churches or wherever you attend, because more people need to hear the voices and the stories of people who are willing to share, because I just am such a big believer in the power of storytelling and how we don't have to share the same experiences, but I always say that people connect with the emotions, because we all experience all the variety of emotions, from pain to happiness to whatever. And so the story is one thing, but it's the emotions behind the story that will always connect us and help to shed light and awareness of how much alike we really are, and how much better off we are with diversity, with difference. So I would say get behind those voices that you support. If you have avenues to have those voices be heard, then do that and invite them out, and invite people to listen when you hear about where they're being, where they're speaking, and definitely just support in the ways that you can. If you can give recommendations, and if you have other topics that you want to hear about or that you want to dive deeper in, then yeah, have those voices come back, because there's always stuff to talk about. I can't wait till we can meet in person again.
I know.
There's just, like Zoom's all right.
We get by with Zoom, but it's, yeah.
And it's a component that I don't want to go away because it gives access. You know what I mean? And we can't always be in person. And I always say, I don't want to lose this. I do miss being in person, but we've got to always have this component to give people access if they can't come in person. But there is something to, being able to see each other in person that gives another aspect to relating.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just a few people just saying that just amazing to hear your story. One person saying that she can only hope she can help her own children developing their own voice in whatever way they choose.
Oh yeah, you can. You're wanting to is so much of the battle there already, because you're going to find ways to do it. So you will support, and I don't want to. I know it's not always easy. I know it isn't. Absolutely, but definitely worth all the struggle. that comes with it, the rewards. I really believe that voice is such an empowering thing, especially for protecting kids from things and knowing how to relate in relationships and just being able to speak up for yourself, because we get that whether it's in the medical field or it's in education. And I'm still, my son is 14, he's just started high school, and I'm still, helping him to find his voice and advocating for his needs. So I know that the struggle can be really like long and hard. And my daughter is pretty good. But yeah, they all need help in that and strengthening in that. And I feel that it's a great protection from abuse, from advantage. Like nothing is 100% guaranteed, right? But I think that when you have a strong voice, it's all the better for you. I feel like people are like, oh, sometimes my husband would feel when I'm advocating for the kids at school, like, or other people would say like, oh no, they might get treated worse. And I'm like, no way. When people know that you're going to speak up either for your child and your child for themselves, the impetus is that they're going to do the right thing, because when they think you're not going to speak or you're not going to say anything or you're easy to be shut down, that's when abuse is going to happen. That's when you're going to be taken advantage of, or they will. So that empowering a voice to know that you're going to speak up. And if you're not going to speak up to them, well, then you're going to speak up to your mom. You're going to tell. That's a good thing too. That's a good thing too. That's very good, because my daughter knows that if she tells me that she got bullied at school or something, that I am on it. I will not allow that. And the thing I like about that too is that is teaching her value and what she's worth and the effort that she's worth, and what I won't put up for her, hopefully she will not put up for herself either. So it's really a good thing for us to support their voice in every way we can. And like I said, if they're not verbal or can't, draw something else. You make a certain beat pattern on the desk, or like whatever. Nobody else might not understand it, but it'll have meaning for you. Find some form of communication that they can do that could represent a sentence, a feeling, an emotion, something else. It can change over time or whatever, but you find your own language and means of communication that are meaningful, and then build upon that and teach them how to then transfer that. And don't feel like they have to. You teach other people to accept their communication. You teach the school that they got to accept that, because of course they'll try to say, well, no, I don't get that. It's got to be done this way. No, it doesn't. You got to understand that this is what it means for them. And we got to push back. We got to push back against systems that are, that don't incorporate what our children need. We all need to push back against it, because they need to change. They need to change. Mm-hmm.
Somebody wants to know if you have any suggested reading or any other learning type webinars on developing advocacy skills, whether I guess maybe for the youth themselves or for parents of younger kids. And if you don't have anything on the top of your head, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I do not.
You can always
prepare that. Yeah.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to put Ingrid's like ways for you to get in touch with her, like either through her Facebook page or through her Instagram. So if you do, have any follow-up questions, or if you want to learn more about her what she does, her business and all that thing, that's the best way to
talk.
get in
And
touch with you, right?
You know what I like to, I look up, and I've bought cards now. I used to look up on the internet like conversation things, because it's hard to think about things to talk about with your kids sometimes. So I have this thing. I would look up questions to ask kids, and then I bought a couple of different decks I have of conversation starters, and they really help you to get to know your children, and having things like that, you know what I mean? It gets them used to talking. and used to talking about themselves.
Mhm.
And then you share too. And when we share and when we're vulnerable too, that really is good modeling for our kids also.
Like that. I
Yeah.
learned so many good things tonight. Like how
Mhm.
to study my kids.
And I do little things like I'll have like a gratitude jar and I'll say like, what's one thing you're grateful for today? And we haven't done it in a long time, but they'll stick it in the jar and then maybe at the end of the year or something, we open them up and see all the little things that you've been grateful for, or we made like family vision board or goals and we revisit it like at the end of the month. I'm like, look what we said we wanted to do, how far we've all gotten. A lot of times, we're like, none of us have done like anything. So it's not like a guilt trip or anything like that.
Yeah.
They'll be like, look, okay, but we will still talk about, hey, what do you think that we could do each, to change that? And the kids will come up with their own thing. They'll say like, oh, maybe I'll try to do this, for this week, but there's no pressure. Right, but it's things that you talk about, and then I'm sometimes I have like sentence stems. Like I had them for a while doing mirror work, where they would look at themselves in the mirror and they had to say I love you, and then say the next sentence was I forgive you. And it could be for whatever. Sometimes they'd be like, I forgive myself. Oh, sorry, not I forgive you, I forgive myself. I forgive myself for getting frustrated today because I couldn't do this, or I forgive myself for not completing whatever. There's no wrong or right. And then the third
Yeah.
stem would be, and I commit to, and they'd make a commitment. But I used to love it because the way that they would say I love you, what a lesson. They'd just be like they'd be so into it. It was so good. Like it was so fun to watch kids. Like they had no problem looking at themselves in the eyes and saying I love you, because the other adults like that feels kind of weird and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the kids were like so into telling themselves how much they love themselves. And that is such a big thing because we don't do that. And looking yourself in the mirror and saying, hey, I'm awesome. Hey, you're an awesome person. Like little things like that. Like find these little things to do, and sometimes I do them for a while and they fall off, but I've been meaning to like revisit that one, and they're just things that I come across in other things, sometimes for adults, but I always try and find like whatever I learn from myself, I try and find a way to teach it to my kids too. I feel like, okay, if I get them mentally sound a lot earlier than I was, and you know what I mean, self-accepting and all that, because I feel like that took me a long time. So whenever if you read about something like for adults, find ways and see if you can adapt it for your kids, things that you hear about that's not necessarily for them, but that you think would be good for them. Do that. And I would also, what I would recommend? I love growth mindset. I love it. I don't know if you're familiar with growth versus fixed mindset. And a fixed mindset is when you think that your intelligence is set, like you can't get past a certain thing, and it will cause you and kids not to try for certain things. And also, if they think they won't succeed. So smart kids do it too. So if that's why the thought is to move away now from praise such as, oh, you're so smart, or aren't you awesome, or good job, because they found that those are actually detrimental. We think we're doing good things by telling kids that, but then they crave this praise thing, and then they're afraid to do anything that won't get that. So they won't stretch them, because sometimes when you stretch, you fail, right? Because you don't know it yet, it's new. And so what they found were that kids who were constantly praised like that wouldn't try new things because they didn't want to fail, because they were addicted to the praise. So what you do is you praise the action, not the outcome. So you'll say, wow, good effort you did. So instead of getting that A, you'll be like, wow, I love the way you kept studying and you didn't give up. Or I like the way you don't praise that, okay, I hit a home run. You're like, wow, look at all the time you practiced or something. So you praise the effort it took to get it and not what the actual outcome is. And then kids learn that, oh, it's the effort, because the other way, it's the outcome that's important, right? Oh, you got an A, you're so smart. Now it's only about the outcome. But when you praise the effort or what it took to get the achievement, then they're not afraid to try. And one of the magic words I learned too is yet. So when your kids say, I can't, you say yet. You can't do it yet, which shows them that you'll get there, most likely. You know what I mean? You keep trying, you keep whatever. So yeah, that's another topic that I love to present on, because as soon as I discovered that, I was like, this is life changing.
100%.
We need to know this stuff, but that's really, really good. And even things like there's 7 characteristics of success. So characteristics that you should be, trying to really nurture in your children, like grit and creativity and gratitude and humility. Like, who knew that those promote success in school and in life? But it does. Being grateful is a quality that can bring you success. And we don't think about that when we think about, wanting our kids to be successful. We just push study hard, but like there's other components that make your kids like really, really successful. Maybe.
Yeah, and almost redefining our own version of success, right? What that means.
So those are some things that you can Google and look up and get more information on. I definitely there's what's it called? Oh, the something lab. I can't remember if it's called the characteristics lab, but it talks about all the different characteristics that I'm going to look it up, and I'll send it to Chantal and she could maybe post it somewhere. But it talks about, those different things like purpose and creativity and gratitude, that when you encourage the development of those character traits in kids, that they are very, very tend to be able to do a lot better, successful in life and in school. And it's just great to know these things, because sometimes we just focus on the grades and things like that, and we worry so much about it if our kids are struggling, that they're not going to have a successful life because they're not getting A's or B's, and not true. Not true. We can move away from that, then we will encourage them that they can do better. Or not better, what I meant is that they can and will be successful. So those are some things that that you could look up, and that I feel to really support voice, right? Those things. Yeah.
100%. Well, we're almost out of time. So I'm just gonna read this one comment, because when we're talking about like how to bring up conversation, how to start conversation, I'm gonna totally look this up on Amazon. We have a set of dice that we often use at the dinner table. Each dice has a question on each side, and we each roll the dice and then answer that question to each other. And my kids roll their eyes at me the whole time.
I love that. Yeah, but you know what? Yeah, our kids roll their eyes at the things we make them feel. Like my daughter, one of her favorite other things to say to me is like, when I talk, she's like, oh, there she goes, all inspirational speaker on me. And I'm like, that's what I can't help it. But so our kids, so she's laughing. But our kids always roll their eyes at us, but they
love it.
They secretly love it. So don't stop. And when they grow up, these are the things they're gonna look back on with nostalgia and be like,
and tell stories about.
Yeah, even though they complain, even though we gotta drag them kicking, screaming to do some stuff, these are the things that they look back fondly on. So don't worry about it. But I love those dice. That sounds really, really great. But yeah, anything to do. And sometimes I even just do the would you rather. Like, just get your kids talking and comfortable with using their voice and expressing themselves. And sometimes, we got to bite their tongue when they say certain things. I certainly find myself doing that. But know that in the end, they're going to grow up to be vocal powerhouses and not be afraid to express themselves, to say what they need or what they want, and to be okay with themselves the more they get to talk and do that stuff. So it's all good.
All good. Amazing. Thank you so much, Ingrid. This was just an amazing time for me. I know you're going to come back and do another talk with us later in the fall, TBD, but keep everybody posted.
Definitely. And if you have suggestions or requests, like, let us know. But I'm so glad to have had this discussion with you today. And I'm always glad when I throw my notes out the window. Like I so much prefer that. So it was really great and really enjoyable. And I just want to thank you all for sharing with me your time, because time is so precious. So I am really grateful that you took this time to spend with me and to talk with me. And I hope that you got some value out of it. Thank you so much.
100%. And we completely appreciate your time too. Pleasure. Wishing everyone a great evening. Take care of yourselves and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.